Good evening and welcome everyone. It is my honor and privilege to welcome you, ma'am. Just let me take a few minutes to introduce our esteemed speaker of the day. Ma'am, is my voice clear? Dr. Sangeeta Bhutta Mehta is professor at Chandigarh College of Architecture, Chandigarh, and also the first woman principal of the CCA. An alumna of CCA, she is an urban designer from SPA New Delhi and a PhD from Punjab University, Chandigarh, with a special interest in the conservation of modern heritage ensembles. She has conducted multiple collaborative student workshops with universities in Israel, USA, Netherlands, Queensland, and her work and these collaborations are centered on the examination of urban landscapes, environmental design, and social issues within Chandigarh. In April 2015, she was the jury member and panelist for the Urban Edge Prize Seminar, University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and thereafter co-curated the Urban Edge exhibition on the urban villages within and around Chandigarh, exhibited at Alliance Francaise Chandigarh, and this has led to the um, launching of the book Chandigarh We Think on January 5, 2018 at the CCA. Well, ma'am, your achievements are a lot, and if I continue, you will hardly get time to speak. So I will just wrap up and tell the audience the last thing that spearheading the recently launched Masters in Architecture program at Chandigarh College of Architecture. Dr. Mehta engages in studios, summer, winter schools, and co-curricular activities also. And in continuation of her role as Nodal Officer UNESCO World Heritage nomination of the Capital Complex, Chandigarh, she has curated several heritage walks on the heritage ensembles of the city, including the Punjab University, Rainview Villages, among others. Thank you for agreeing to do the webinar with us, ma'am. We welcome you wholeheartedly, and I welcome the audience also. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, senior colleagues, members of the Alumni Association, Punjab University, my dear friends. At the onset, I would like to thank my alma mater, Punjab University, Professor Deepti Gupta, for giving me this honor and allowing me an audience to share my thoughts on the 55th death anniversary of none else but the greatest architect of the 20th century, Monsieur Le Corbusier, who is lesser known as Charles Edward John Murray Green. Born in the Swiss Alps, today I will try to take you down a journey of memory lane, for which I owe my credence, and I also owe a lot to the great architect for being today what I am, serving my alma mater as the head of the institution. So I would like to take you on this journey today, and with this I will share my screen.
Ma'am, click on the share screen button.
Are you beginning to see my screen now?
Let's wait for a few seconds. It's showing something that we are going to view. Let's see.
Okay. Are we beginning to see something?
No, ma'am, we can't see. Are you logging in on a laptop? No?
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen, and I'm also sharing my share content. Am I sharing now?
Yes, ma'am. Now it's absolutely fine.
Okay, can you see my presentation?
Yes, ma'am. Full screen. And side by side, you can switch on your camera also. We can see you also if you want.
Okay, I'll try and do that also. Okay, here I go. So now you have me and you have the presentation.
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am. Perfectly fine. Carry on.
So this is about the scientific temper of the modern movement, or the modern mouvement as we refer to him in French. Why today we are talking about the scientific temper of the modern movement is because Le Corbusier was the greatest scientific inventor of his times. He was a collaboration of the art, of architecture, and of a scientific revolution. He was a man shaped by circumstance, born in the Swiss Alps, the Jura Mountains, at the Le Chaux de Fonds, which was in Switzerland, as we all popularly know the place. He was the son of none else but a watch engraver, and he was also the son of his mother being a physician and his father being a sundial or a watch dial engraver. So Le Corbusier was a man shaped by context. He grew up in the Jura landscape, and he was a prolific writer, a painter, a sculptor, artist, architect, and also a technologist rolled into one. His influences were largely Amédée Osborne and Auguste Perret. Auguste Perret we know as the man of ferroconcrete, and he was also friends to Einstein and Picasso. Such were the beginnings with which Le Corbusier began his life, and he had an elder brother. And with this, he began the early life to spend time at Le Chaux de Fonds and slowly moved from the Swiss Alps to none else but the great city of Paris. And with this, I would like to also mention that while he was at the Le Chaux de Fonds, he was very ably also affected by joining the École des Arts, which was the art school. And it was here that he learned the art of painting, of mural making, of design with nature. And the context always stayed as part and parcel of his precision making. And being the son of a watchmaker and engraver, he learned the technology of precision from his father. Travels also played a very large role in the making of Le Corbusier's career. He always was found in worker pants with a pocket of sketchbooks, pencils, and he always studied light. And studying light was something that really brought with him the architecture of technology, because he would look at the buildings and he was very fond of traveling. And his travels to the east, to the orient, to Milan, to Florence, and so on and so forth. And he even stayed in Vienna for months because he was there working on the villas that he was doing in Le Chaux de Fonds. And it was in 1908 that he traveled to Lyon and met Tony Garnier, to whom we credit the industrial city. His greatest teacher being travel, he also had an apprenticeship with Auguste and Gustave Perret as a draftsman. And as we see in this faded print above, it was the classicism of the Perret brothers that taught him to take care of concrete. During the travels, he did what is very famously known as the Voyage d'Orient, which means his voyage to Orient, and the study of the Acropolis left a great mark on the Corbusier, and he continued his career further with the study of light, the study of buildings, the study of shadows on them. He moved to Paris, as I mentioned earlier, and 1917 was finally his departure. And he went on to get an apartment in Paris and set up his own architecture studio, and none else with Amédée Osenfant. And with Osenfant, he had only two ambitions. One, to be the greatest architect, and second, to be a great painter. the studio that he had. And his early beginnings also had him looking at the system of proportions, which we will come to a little later in this. Earlier, he was with Amédée Ozenfort. He wanted to be an immense service would be done by architects, decorators, because he wanted to create what we know today as the palette of Le Corbusier. I'm exceptionally grateful to the Foundation Le Corbusier for allowing me to replicate some of the images which are in this presentation, for they are very kind and very generous, and he wants to acknowledge the wealth of the archive at the foundation, which is graciously looked after by Benedict Gandini, a conservation architect. And on his color palette, Corbusier believed that architects and decorators would do a great service. And with his color palette, he went on to make, as I mentioned earlier, the Le Modular in 1955. He even wrote a poem on the right angle, and the series of sculptures, paintings, and murals that he created. Not only was a great artist, but also a great writer who launched magazines. Out of his 24-hour day, 18 hours was spent in writing, reading, sculpting, and so on and so forth, and also doing architecture. It was in 1920 that he adopted the pseudonym Le Corbusier, which means the crow, and his architectural persona was given and derived from his maternal grandfather, Le Corbusier. The temper of his modern movement came up with a beautiful system of proportions that makes the bad hard and the good easy. And believe me, our first semester of architecture in the school, in every school in fact, begins with this favorite drawing of showing how the human figure performs various activities in daily motion. These were created by none else but Le Modular by Corbusier, where he says, humanity is the basic value of the modular. It is a universal proportion system that places none else but the human needs at the center of design and architecture. And the great 5 points of architecture, which for every architect are like the Bible, which he finds greatly in the Villa Savoy. The points are a free plan, a free facade, a ribbon window, a terrace garden, and a pilotis, which is really the ground plane to create the ribbon windows. The Villa La Roche is another one where he creates the architectural promenade, a free plan, a free facade, ribbon window, terrace garden, and again a pilotis. What came as a turning point to Le Corbusier was the creation of the 4th Siam Congress and the Functional City, which was finally made into a documentary because it traced the development of a voyage. It took across a ship that sailed from Marseille and back. And that is how it was the development of the functionalist architecture and what we know today as the modern city. And it was made by Siegfried Gideon and his friend Moholy Saibal Nagi. And they said it was the greatest architects conference that took place between and on a ship on a voyage. The ship 1933 was the year, and the SS Patrie sailed from Marseille to Athens and back, and led to the formation of none else but the functionalist buildings of the international style and its regional variations. He was very much absorbed with the idea of the house and the idea of the housing. And what he formed finally was the slab apartment block called the Marseille block. And several of these slab apartments were built at Marseille, at Lyon, and so on and so forth. And these blocks were actually on pilotis, which you can see in the bottom here, which means freeing the ground for recreation, for children to play, for women to take children in prams, and to actually create a green city. The scientific temper continued in the use of béton brut, or the exposed concrete. Here you can see how he would explain the qualities of the concrete that he had led and seen in his studies of light at Athens, at Acropolis, and how he used the same quality of light to create his buildings of exposed concrete, which was the new material of the modern movement. He also created several plans of the ideal cities. And this is La Vie Verte, which is basically freeing again the ground and putting the buildings on pilotis. His wonderful scheme of the contemporary city, Plan Voisin, was basically the solution for a project plan to decongest the city of Paris into 18 glass towers. In 1958, La Défense was realization to the Plan Voisin. So the Plan Voisin actually came from the car company that the Voisin car maker owned, and he was to partner it if it actually came. Le Corbusier saw glaring bankruptcy in civic amenities and living conditions of urbanity, and this was the solution that he proposed for it. You can see the contemporary city. So he made several plans. He was a great visionary, and this is what was the most important thing about him, that he thought ahead of his times. Whether it was a small church at Firminy, or it was the Rochon, which was a pilgrimage site north of France, the way he sculpted and modeled his buildings, his sketchbooks, which are famous today and have been for the last several decades, were actually what he carried and what he doodled continuously in them. And then he was very fond of doing murals. So he did these huge enamel doors, and there's one that he did for the Rochon, and you can find similar ones that he did in the Capitol in Chandigarh. As I said earlier, he was very fond of drawing immaculate drawings, immaculate color pencils, and that's what he used to create his color palette. And he was very fond of using subjects like bottles, like musical instruments, like even drawing his own hands. And there are several studies that he would do of the drawings in various positions. And then these drawings came to actually decorate and make beautiful his own apartment in Paris. And several of these were depicting even the travels that he made in various parts of the globe. As I said, he was interested in a color palette. And today, the Corbusier Foundation, for whatever conservation works are carried out, they must adhere to polychromy, the palette of works that he. And the famous Rado company, which is based in Switzerland, recently launched a palette of colors of Le Corbusier, which is the Rado watch, in 8 specific Corbusier colors. The man was not stopping anywhere, and he even went into doing signature furniture, which is so famous today and continues to be so because of its, you could say, minimal decoration, complete usefulness, adherence to minimal material, and technology. Because he insisted that just as a house is a machine to live in, a chair is a machine to sit in. And what is a machine if it is not technologically sound? This kind of innovation continues in his Philips Pavilion, which was in Brussels for the World Fair, an exposition international in 1958. And here the cylindrical dielectrics of strongly reinforced concrete played with the cables to create the wonder for the Philips company. And you can see this is the building in a cold climate, and see inside how he creates the thread of innovation and actually the creation of an electronic poem of Le Corbusier at the Philips Pavilion. And he says it's the beginning of a new art form. He gives the electronic games to the world. And as I said, he was always making plans for cities. He said he was the first one to actually acknowledge that in the Algiers plan that he made, that if the automobile is here to stay, let us plan for it. Let us prepare for it. In 1933, I'm going back to this a little bit, saying how he was ahead of his times. He thought of creating a museum of unlimited growth, the Musée Croissant Illimitable, which really meant that he wanted to create a limitless museum. And there were three that were built later. There are one in Tokyo and two in India. And we are lucky to have the Unlimited Growth Museum as our government museum and art gallery in Sector 10, Chandigarh. And I have all the pictures for you of the Museum of Unlimited Growth, one in Ahmedabad, another in Tokyo, and the third in our own Chandigarh. Recently, the Government Museum and Art Gallery in Chandigarh has been given a Getty grant by the Getty Paul Trust in USA for creating a conservation management plan. Well, now we come to our very own city. The Siam principles of the 1933 ship voyage from Marseille to Paris and back. And he says the Siam principles were realized in none other but the functional city of Chandigarh. And with Chandigarh came this golden handshake between Corbusier and our own great premier, that is Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And on the foothills of the Shivaliks laid down the checkerboard plan of Chandigarh, which has the seasonal rivulets on the eastern and western boundaries. I will not get into that detail. We live in the city. We know its wonders, and the greatest wonder that the city has actually given to us is its prominence as a UNESCO World Heritage. And it continues to be India's premier as a symbol of newly created flowering genius and the last thing in beauty, simplicity, as mentioned and oft quoted in the words of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And with this, it was also that Corbusier gave the open hand to the city, which continues to be its symbol of to give and to receive. This is the Secretariat buildings. Most of the buildings of Chandigarh and the capital were realized after Le Corbusier passed away in 1965. However, it was the Secretariat building and the High Court building that he actually saw during his lifetime. And he was the one who talked about, again, the quality of life. And therefore, you have these reflecting pools, which are microclimatic aerators, as well as reflect the beauty of the exposed concrete. Now, with the dull concrete came in his colors. And there you, once again, from the Ronchamp, you have this, again, this enamel door, which is pivoted and actually becomes the central portal to the Grand Assembly. And inside, you also have the great tapestries, which he actually created full-size cartoons on paper to be translated using motifs from nature, from life. This happened.
Everything's fine. Continue.
Yeah, I was just trying to get on to the next slide, but it seems that it's again got stuck. No, that's for annotation. Okay, let me try and get out. Actually, people are trying to send me signals for annotation. Okay. So an interior of the Haryana Assembly that we see here, and the splash of color that actually comes in very carefully by Corbusier. And what we see is that there were 9 courtrooms, each embellished with what Corbusier called the nomadic murals. And these murals were called so because he said man is a nomad. He can actually roll the mural or this tapestry under his arm and go to another space in the world, which is why they are called nomadic murals. A little lesser known is the Bhakra Dam. Bhakra Dam, which took actually several years to be built, was a multi-purpose project, and it was a barrage. It consisted of a scientific invention to have a dam, to have powerhouses, and Corbusier was working at the capital at that time, and being the highest gravity dam in the world and the highest in Asia at that point of time, the waters of the river Sutlej had to be dammed at a cleft, and it was to create a lake and 30 square miles, and because of its beauty, it became a good tourist attraction. Corbusier actually made a complete model of this on site, and this was the place where the open hand was actually fabricated. It took 21 years to complete, and a small township was also being meant to be there for the engineers and their families who were trying to build the dam, and permanent housing stuff. Corbusier's advice was dam because the engineers thought that you could create an aesthetic and plastic touch to an otherwise straightforward design. The structure of the dam and the powerhouses had already been decided when Corbusier was consulted. So they said to add a bit of aesthetics, we should bring in. But he had his own grand plans, and his main contribution was the design of the balustrade. But however, even greater than that, he had a proposal to have a huge open hand as a common feature. However, that could not be taken up, and most of his projects included a cafeteria, a motel, a sports club. He abandoned because of his death. He could not complete this work. However, the open hand was brought down to the Capitol complex, and it is installed here, and we see it as a wind vane. And some people say that it is like a pigeon. There are various connotations and different ways of people interpreting. However, it continues to be the symbol of the city, open to give, open to receive. Corbusier's journey in 1965 ended while swimming in the Cape at Cape Martin and at Rock Broom Cape, and he was holidaying there. And as he wanted it to be, he celebrated his life with all he wanted to do, 24 hours of the day. Whatever he wanted to execute, experiment, document, and imagine were all there for him, right in front of him, because he dared to believe that there could be a marriage between art, technology, and architecture. And he actually proved to people that he was way ahead of his time, as did his plans, which were on paper, but also realized ones, which, for example, the city that we are living in today. With that, I would like to end my presentation, and I thank you for your wonderful patience.
Thank you, ma'am. And it was really interesting, especially because we are getting to know about the history of familiar places we see. And I would request the audience to type their questions in the chat, or you can raise your hands, or on the chat itself there's an option. Either you type the question or raise your hands, and we will unmute you and you can ask your question.
Very nice presentation, ma'am. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Would you like to ask something from ma'am, from our speaker? Well, we are getting some comments that it was a nice presentation. Thank you. And Deepti ma'am, it seems that you don't have any questions in the chat box. Do you know personally anyone who would like to ask something?
Yeah, we have some shares in the chat box. Great, insightful and crisp shares. It was indeed very, very crisp. I was wondering when you discussed the topic I was wondering, how are you going to contain, this man within? But I like the way you organized the material. It was done so masterfully and systematically to give us just the right perspective. I can see Professor Ramanjit Johal is also with us. Professor Neelam Grover is with us, and of course, Professor Gant is with us. I can see Dr. Balram Gupta, Professor Pankaj Mala Sharma. So we've got lots of Chandigarh covers with us. Professor Johal, would you like to say something here?
I have unmuted.
Yes, Ramanjit, would you like to say something? Yeah, Ramanjit.
Professor Kent wants to say something.
I was,
Yes,
madam, I
Professor Gant.
was, madam, I was expecting Professor S.S. Bhatti here, who was the first principal of the College of Architecture, Professor S.S. Bhatti. I am very well known to him, and I have seen most of his, I would say, presentations. It is so nice to listen to you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Professor Bhatti was my teacher. He continues to be my teacher. And he was one of the founder teachers of this institution. And when I took admission in this college, he was our principal.
Dikti ma'am, we've got a message from Professor Ramanjit in the chat. You have replied.
Yes. I can see a question from Professor Amanji Johal. So should I take it? Do we have time?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So Professor Johal, thank you so much for joining in. And your question is on the preservation of the tapestries. So I'm happy to share with you that during the conservation management plan, the tapestries were an integral part of the plan. And very recently, the 9 courtrooms have been restored, and the furniture has been restored, the original lighting has been restored. And to share with this audience, I would like to say the tapestries were found cut by the air conditioning channels. And when we went to look at them, found the cut pieces behind. So actually, the pieces are very much there, and we have been now able to restore the tapestries. So if you go now to visit the Capitol complex, I will proudly show you the restored tapestries. So please do visit.
I would like to share with the audience here that Professor Johal doesn't just talk about restoration, she actually does restoration at her end, In the university, we had a set of these chairs designed by Corbusier, and they were going to seat. So she designed some kind of upholstery which did not disturb the original design, and she managed to preserve those chairs. So here is a person who's been passionately fighting for the heritage of Chandigarh. When we look at accounts in the newspapers of people who are indiscriminately stealing treasures from Chandigarh and selling them at auctions abroad, so we need more people like Professor Johal who value the heritage. And I also must tell you that she was responsible for getting the Getty funds for the Gandhi Bhavan on campus. Dr. Bagga, would you like to speak about the Gandhi Bhavan? Because we are all very proud of it at DU.
I'm also very proud of it, ma'am. Like you all, I also have this great fondness for Gandhi Bhavan. because as a student, we would often be taken for site visits to do sketching at the Punjab University. And sitting at the edge of the pool of the Gandhi Bhavan with our sketchbooks and those palm trees, we have a great memory. The Gandhi Books, I would proudly say, is the second stage of an implementation grant of the Ghetto Trust again. And the grant has recently come to the university for its conservation of the pool base, because they're going to repair the pool base, and also they are going to take care of the terrazzo wall cladding, which is there, which is very unique because it shines like almost the jewel in the crown of the surrounding red sandstone buildings. So compared to the Fine Arts Museum and the other buildings around, it is starkly different because of its composition. It is also starkly different because of its statement that it creates. And I think it's a great opportunity for the university because the Getty was the first one to recognize this building in Chandigarh and also in India to give the grant. So we have a conservation management plan in place, and now we hopefully are going to start work on the pool base once the pandemic gives us a little breather and also the monsoon settles.
Thank you, Dr. Bada. We also have with us Professor M. Sharma. We all know him as the custodian of the Gandhi Bhavan, and I'm sure he is listening in. Professor Sharma, would you like to say something about the Gandhi Bhavan?
Ma'am, Dr. Balram Gupta has also unmuted himself. I think.
Professor Balram Gupta, would you like to say something? Yes, please.
Certainly. You know, to hear this have in the city several decades this time. Really a joy. In the High Court premises is the where all Chandigarh has done. And my own feelings are so intimated that as a student of law at the Punjab University, I used to visit regularly the university library. A reference has been made chairs in the library were used. And they were put chairs. Imagine the whole thing, but the design makes all the difference context. The tapestries also have been talked about. In fact, the collage of tapestry that we in the courtrooms at the in fact, the very first wing having 8 to 9 books, they all had the tapestries that were designed by Le Corbusier that particular point in time. Over a period of time, those particular tapestries have been maintained and restructured as such, trying to maintain of those tapestries. And therefore, it's a joy to have grown with the city. It's great job. Such a delight. It was a pleasure to hear the speaker.
Punya, we have architect Pawan Kumar Sharma
Yes, ma'am.
with us. Yeah. Can you unmute him?
Yes, ma'am.
May I say, Madam, may I share my?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Yes, sir. After this. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Very nicely presented legacy of Corbusier. Uh, but my question is about the maintenance of the facilities and activities created in the city. What would you say about this? That is by just
Yes, Dr. Baga, could you get his question?
Thank you, Mr. Pavan, for your question and for your remark. You are from PUDA, you represent, but also from the CCA, you are a citizen first for us. Definitely the augmentation of facilities and infrastructure, especially in the leisure and the green areas of the city, they need to be periodically and routinely maintained. And I, for one, feel that Corbusier may have given us a city, but it is for the citizens to cherish and take the city forward. So to consider that Chandigarh would continue to be the verdant city that was envisioned is perhaps a dream, and we have to work to make that dream work. So we have to take, first of all, we have to take pride, and second, we have to take ownership. Ownership in the sense that when we are walking through or moving through the city, how many of us think of it as a city that belongs to us? We always look for what the city can do for us, but how about us doing something for the city? But compared to other cities, I still feel Chandigarh's citizens, they have a sense of deep pride. And it is because of this deep sense of pride that despite this pandemic, we have been able to cycle our way to work. We have been to cycle our way through the city for our fitness. And we have actually showed the country, if not the world, that small-sized cities with carefully planned monofunctional places, I am repeating the word monofunctional places, is still the order and the answer for today. If you look at Japan, recently on YouTube and on WhatsApp, there was one of these public restrooms video which was being floated. And look at the technology of Japan. It says, when you look at it from outside, you can see how clean the restroom is. But the restroom is in a public park. And these were trial restrooms that they had created. And once you go inside and you touch the door to close it, the restroom offers you the privacy. So if technology is the teacher, then definitely we have to take our steps forward and maintain our city. So it is for us. I don't know, maybe because I'm a teacher, I say that, or I'm always a student wanting to learn, I say that. We have to make the first moves.
May I say something, madam? May I say something?
Yes, please go ahead, sir.
Well, I have the pleasure of knowing town planners of Chandigarh now. Now they are not town; they are living in Chandigarh. Professor Jagjit Singh Guman and Mr. K.K. Kaul is my neighbor. In fact, my fascination for architecture started when I was in UK for my doctoral program. Visited a number of forts and cathedrals, and now for the last 2 years, I'm passionately, virtually have collected a large number of slides on cathedrals, temples of the world, as well as mosques, and of course gurdwaras. It is my pleasure to collect this information on architecture, and it has been great pleasure to listen to you, madam, again. Thank you.
Sir, as I said earlier in my talk also, that Corbusier was a multifaceted personality, which means architecture being the mother of all arts. We have enough room in the architect's mind to be able to engage everybody with us. And it is our moral duty, it is our social obligation as the architect of the city, because Corbusier engaged himself with the city. He engaged, his manifesto was to be a utopian city which had space and place for everybody. So I'm so grateful that this audience is so diverse, and it is normally we speak only to architects, but Professor Deepthi has given me this wonderful platform to be able to speak and share my thoughts with people from other disciplines who appreciate and who feel responsible for their city.
Thank you, ma'am. I can see on the chat your slogan is getting popular. Everyone is responding to it. With permission, ma'am, if we don't have any more questions, maybe move towards the end of the meeting.
Yes, please. And be sure to repeat the slogan when you thank everyone.
Well, on behalf of Punjab University Alumni Association, first of all, I would like to thank ma'am, Sangeeta Pata ma'am, for this wonderful presentation. Ma'am, when you said I have around 40 something slides, I said, oh my God, I don't know how long it, and then you suddenly said that is it, and I was taken aback. And we wanted you to continue. I was actually enlarging my text. I was copying it and enlarging it and reading what you had written, especially about Bhakra camp. It was very interesting. Others also, but I could relate to it more. And I'm sure the audience also was equally, into it. And thank you so much for your time. And I also thank the wonderful audience. And thank you, Dipti ma'am, for arranging such a different type of a webinar for us. Thank you everyone who participated. And as ma'am said, please let us go back to the slogan that I'm responsible. It is our city and we should take care of it. Thank you. Ma'am, would you like to say something?
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I hope we keep getting talented stars, Dr. Bagga. Thank you, Dr. Bagga, for joining us. It was a pleasure. Good evening, everyone, and have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Okay, so with your permission, I'm going to end the meeting.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. It was very nice. Nice of you.
In fact, I could request those who are here to please
Bye bye.
turn on the camera for a minute if possible. I would like to click your pictures if you're there. Okay, ma'am. I am too late to announce that. Okay, Baka ma'am, I'll just end the meeting then. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.